If we don't get our rights from God, who do we get them from? Man. But guess what? If man gives you your rights, man can take them away. Hi, welcome to the Master's Program. I'm Dennis Prager. This is part one of what I call the consequences of secularism, or to be precise, the terrible consequences of secularism. So I'm sure you've all heard that some people are religious extremists. Have you ever heard of secular extremists or secular extremism? No. And you know why? Because the general modern belief is you can be too religious, but you can't be too secular. It's like being too rich or too happy or too healthy. You can't be too secular. But it's not true. If society gets too secular, it ends. That's right, it ends. It is the end of the civilization as we have known it. It is a catastrophe. First, I want you to understand, I am not making the case here for the existence of God or for the truth of any given religion. I know that sounds odd, but I want you to understand this. I am appealing to your intellect, not to your beliefs, not to your theology or lack of theology. If you are an honest atheist, you can agree with every single thing I am about to say. And there are religious people who won't agree with everything I am about to say. Secondly, I fully acknowledge that there are wonderful secular people, and there are some awful religious people. I fully acknowledge that. This is not an argument that there are no good secular people, or that all religious people are wonderful. That is not the argument, because I live in the real world and I know that that would not be the case. Nor am I making, number three, I am not making an argument for any one religion. If you understand the consequences of secularism and then decide to be a committed Catholic, a committed Protestant Christian, a committed Jew, a committed Mormon, I'm fine with that. I am not here to sell you a given religion. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to convince you that the consequences of the death of the God of the Bible, the Judeo-Christian God, has been a calamity for civilization and for people individually. I believe that every one of these arguments is unassailable. That's why I'm appealing to your intellect. I'm not trying to make a case for any given religion. I happen to be a committed Jew, but I'm not here to sell you on Judaism or Christianity. I'm just here to sell you on the certitude that it's been a calamity, that God and the Bible have died as operative elements in Western civilization. I'm also here to explain another thing. I'm only talking about the Judeo-Christian world. I'm not talking about any other religious civilization, any other religion. By the way, I would welcome more secularism in a place like Iran. I'm well aware of that. Between the Islamic extremism of Iran at the time of this video and a secular Iran, I would prefer a secular Iran. So I'm not making the case for anything but the bases of Western civilization. They have been based on the God of the Bible, Judeo-Christian values. How often have you heard, believe me, if you went to college, you heard this, more people have been killed in the name of God or in the name of religion, and they're specifically usually referring to Christians killing all sorts of people and so on. Christians have killed people, and they've done some terrible things. There's no question about that either. As a Jew, I particularly know that. I've written, one of my books is on anti-Semitism. It has a big chapter on Christian anti-Semitism. By the way, for the record, it has a big chapter on left-wing anti-Semitism. It has a big chapter on Islamic anti-Semitism. This has not been a monopoly of Christianity. But let me give you an example of how exaggerated things are. You know how often people give the example of the Spanish Inquisition? Oh, Christianity, oh my God, the number of people it has killed. The Inquisition and the Crusades. You know how many people were killed in the 250 years of the Spanish Inquisition? About 3,000. Now, every one of those deaths is a horror. That's true. But let's keep it in perspective. That's about 12 a year. That's not exactly what we call genocide. People don't know that, though. The greatest genocides of the 20th century, and indeed basically of history, occurred in the 20th century, and virtually every one was caused by a secular regime. How often have you learned that at high school or college? And the answer is never. They never tell you that. In fact, they probably don't even discuss these genocides. Yes, communism is responsible alone for about 100 million non-combatants, just civilians, being starved, tortured, shot, beaten, frozen. Communism is a secular doctrine. It was an anti-religious doctrine. The first thing that communist regimes did in almost any country was to kill the clergy. When Lenin came to power and then Stalin, Russian Orthodox priests were murdered in the thousands. Churches were either converted into some communist building or just destroyed. That's the first thing that communist regimes have done almost everywhere they took over, was destroy religion. Nobody talks about that. It's as if these 100 million people don't matter. You know, Stalin said, at least it's attributed to Stalin, he said, oh, one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. That's the problem. When I tell you 100 million people were murdered by secular regimes, it's just a number. The human mind is not capable of appreciating the staggering amount of suffering and evil 100 million entails. So when you hear next time, oh, religion has killed more people than anything else, it's just not true. It's a lie, actually. Secularism has killed more people than anything else. I'd like to read to you from Douglas Murray. Douglas Murray is not a religious man, to the best of my knowledge. He's a major thinker, a British thinker, and he has written a very powerful work, The War Against the West. The Christian faith has an uncommonly long tradition of opposition to slavery. Saint Bathilda was a former slave herself who campaigned for the abolition of slavery in the 7th century. St. Anselm outlawed slavery in 1102, while Archbishop of Canterbury William Wilberforce and the Clapham sect spent all their energies and resources fighting to bring an end to the practice, inspired in this vision by their Christian faith. And again, I'm a Jew telling you this. I have no axe to grind here. My axe to grind is what is true. That's my biggest axe, just as a general statement of my beliefs. You got to tell the truth. So people talk about all the bad Christianity did, but you never learn of all the good that Christianity did. What is the world in which human rights were enshrined, where women were elevated from second-class status? These developed in the West. The West was formed by Christianity, which was ultimately formed by the Jewish scriptures known as the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. That's why Margaret Thatcher said, the West is a Judeo-Christian civilization. You drop the Judeo-Christian roots, you drop this civilization. Slavery? Every society had slavery. Every. In Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, before it was Latin America, Mesoamerica, South America, everywhere. Native Americans, blacks, everyone had slaves. Muslims had an immense number of slaves. So the question is not who had slaves, not what country or nation or civilization had slavery. What nation or civilization abolished slavery? And the answer was the Christian or Judeo-Christian one of the West. That's what mature people will ask is the question. You don't ask how was any group like everybody else. You ask how were they different? And now on to consequences of secularism. Let's begin with numbers killed. If you care about human beings, why would you not care about what happens when you kill the fundamental bases of the idea that human beings are precious, which I'm going to come to? The very notion that human beings are precious is a fairly rare ideal, which emanates again from the Judeo-Christian world. But if you care about people, you won't advocate a secular world. You could be angry at your Catholic nun who rapped your knuckles. You could be angry at some rabbi who yelled at you or your grandmother when they were kids. You could be angry at what some pastor did to embezzle funds in a church. All of that I understand, but you can't allow such ideas, such facts to cloud your vision. If you love humans, you can't love secularism. Secularism may be great for government. It's not great for society. It's not great for people's happiness, as I will come to. It's an unhealthy idea. G.K. Chesterton, a great British thinker, end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. I could not establish that he actually said this, but he's the one who it's often attributed to. Whoever said it, it's brilliant. When people stop believing in God, and we're talking about the God of the West, the God of the Hebrew and Bible and the New Testament, when people stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing. They believe in anything. That is one of the great truths of our time. They believe in anything. Have you noticed how much chaos is out there today? Like defund the police? Religious people, you don't identify the idea of defund the police, an idea that only increases human suffering. If you're a big fan of rape and murder and theft, you should be an advocate of defunding the police. I can't think of a stupider idea. I can, in fact, think of many ideas that are as stupid, or if you will, as absurd. But that's a big one. And this is all a function of the secular world in which we live. We become stupid as we depart from the wisdom bases of the West, which are located in that book that people laugh at called the Bible. So let me give you a number of the absurd ideas to vindicate the line: when people stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. So here are a few. Men give birth. Men don't give birth. If men give birth, why do we only know this now? Why didn't all the scientists of history know that? Did we just discover that men give birth? How did they miss it for all of these centuries? How did every single great doctor and biologist of the past miss it? Isn't that remarkable? We've now discovered that men give birth. It's an absurdity. Do trans men give birth? Fine. So then say trans men, don't say men. Be honest. But that's a very different story when you say trans men give birth than if you say men give birth. Men do not give birth, period. It's the secular world that has enabled us to say such things, and the most absurdity. What else? Oh yes, it's fair to allow biological men to compete against women in women's sports. That is an absurdity. We all know it's unfair. We all know it. It's impossible to think clearly and think it is fair for a biological man to compete against women in, let us say, track or in swimming. And yet we are supposed to believe it's fair. How about one of my favorite, Latinx? Have you heard about that one? Yeah, that's the way the New York Times and other secular institutions have decided to spell Latinos, people of Latin descent. Not as Latinos, but as Latinx, Latinx. When I first heard it, I thought it was a Latin Kleenex. Latinx. Think about that. Are there any Latinos who uses it? Do you think anybody in Argentina or Colombia or Brazil says Latinx? What other absurdities of our time? Oh yes, here's a beauty. Racial segregation is anti-racist. Opposition to racial segregation is racist. Proof? Columbia University, which I attended. Columbia University has an all-black dorm. An all-black dorm? That's racial segregation, isn't it? Ah, are religious Christians and Jews for that? No, they're not. Now, there are secular people who oppose it, but virtually everybody who agrees with it is secular. And Columbia is totally secular. It's profoundly anti-religious in its outlook. It has contempt, basically, for religious Christians, and for that matter, religious Jews, but religious Christians are far more numerous. And if you oppose an all-black dorm, you're the racist. Again, this is all just one consequence of secularism, that we believe in anything. You know who believes in all-black dormitories? The Ku Klux Klan and the woke. The color of your skin is important. Why is it important? What does it tell about you? Tell me one thing that the race of your skin tells me about you. Does it tell me if you're kind or cruel? Does it tell me if you're smart or stupid? Does it tell me if you're honest or corrupt? Does it tell me about your passions, your loves, your pains, your hurts, your anything? What does it tell me about? Nothing. I know nothing about you if I know your skin color. Nothing. It's as unimportant and perhaps less important than your shoe color. Because there must have been a reason you chose the color of the shoes you're wearing today. That's another example of an absurdity in our post-religious age that we live in. If America is systemically racist, and it's an absurdity, but if it's true, why have 3 million blacks moved to the United States of America in the last few decades from Africa and the Caribbean? Why? Are they stupid? If you think America is systemically racist, every black who's moved here voluntarily is an idiot. Ask them, are you an idiot? No Jews moved to Germany in the 1930s, correct? Not one. No matter how bad they had it in Eastern Europe, they didn't move to Germany because Germany was systemically racist. America is not systemically racist. It is the land of opportunity for people of every race, creed, color. Diversity is our greatest strength. How often have you heard that? So here's a beauty for you. If diversity is our greatest strength, why did the New York Times recently publish a piece that said the happiest countries in the world are Finland, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland? They led the 2018 ranking of the World Happiness Report, which is a joke, the World Happiness Report. It cracks me up. Anyway, fine. So you can't hold both. You can't say that Finland, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland are the happiest countries in the world and then tell me that diversity is our greatest strength. Because there's no diversity in those 4 countries, and they're the happiest in the world. Virtually everybody is the same color, virtually everyone's the same race, virtually everyone is the same religion, whether they believe in it or not, the same stock, the same language. They're as undiverse as you can get in the Western world, those 4 countries, and they're the happiest. I'm not against diversity at all. Diversity can be a great strength if people share the same values. E pluribus unum, one of the mottos of America, out of many one. Oh, if we all buy basic moral values emanating from Judeo-Christian values and as reflected in the Constitution of the United States, for example, I think diversity can be a tremendous strength. But not if it's used to divide people as it now is, and we don't share a common value system any longer. Next time you hear about the happiest country, you say, they don't strike me as very diverse. Free speech, here's another absurdity. This is all part of what happens with the secular onslaught. People believe in anything. 45% of American young people say they don't believe in free speech for hate speech. They believe in free speech, they say, but not for hate speech. They don't realize how foolish a comment that is. If you don't believe in free speech for hate speech, you don't believe in free speech. What do you believe in free speech for? Love speech? And who determines what's the hate speech? You do, so you don't believe in free speech. Capitalism is evil. You can't get more absurd than that. People who say that don't really care about human beings suffering, just like with the genocide issue. People really don't care. The only thing that has lifted billions of people from abject poverty in the history of the world is capitalism. The only thing. The death of meaning. If there's no God who created the human being and who cares about the human being, there's no ultimate meaning to life. We're all a coincidence. That's all we are. We die, and for eternity, we're in oblivion. We're here for a tiny, tiny blink of an eye and then die, and it's as if we didn't exist. If there is no God, and I'm talking again about the God of the Bible, if there is no God who created us and who cares about us and who dispenses ultimate justice, there's no meaning in life. And by the way, every secular philosopher that I know of has acknowledged this. If they were honest, there's no God, there's no meaning. Of course not. There's no ultimate meaning. You can make up a meaning. That's called existentialism. Because you can't look in the mirror in the morning and go, how you doing, meaningless one? You'll go crazy. People have to make up a meaning. And some of them are beautiful. You'll have meaning in your work. You'll have meaning in being a mother or a father. You'll have meaning in being a good neighbor. There are a whole host of beautiful things that can give you meaning. But ultimately, there's no meaning. You're no different from an ant. Do ants have ultimate meaning? I don't think so. This is a major crisis because people seek meaning. The desire for meaning is greater than the desire for anything else in life other than food. It is even greater than the sex drive. There are people who have voluntarily or even involuntarily, in the case of some people who are widowed, for example, who do not have sex. But if they have meaning, they can lead a happy life. But you could have all the sex you could even fantasize. And if you don't have meaning in your life, you're not going to be a happy human being. The drive for meaning is the most intense. People ache for it. It was a given in the religious world that preceded our secular world. Not anymore. People seek meaning in the secular world that has been killed by the secular world. What they do is they make up substitute or secular religions. No more Christianity, no more Judaism, but that doesn't mean no more religion. Now it's secular religion. Feminism, science, Marxism, socialism, communism, environmentalism. These are isms. They are like a religious doctrine. They are substitutes for the disappeared Christianity in most cases, and Judaism in a smaller number of cases. That's where people derive their meaning, from feminism, socialism, Marxism, environmentalism. Oh, the environmentalist movement, oh, they have everything. They have a new god, not the god of the Bible, it's Gaia, the goddess of earth. And not only that, they're saving the world. You can't get better than that. Yes, that's what they believe. You will save the world if you go green. That it is the end of the world if we don't go green. I'm not denying that there is climate change. I'm not denying that the world is getting warmer. But yes, it's hysteria. That we are on the brink of the extinction of biological species, including our own. But hey, once you acknowledge that, you have less meaning in being an environmentalist. I have a riddle I made up a few years ago. What do you call a religious person who says the world is coming to an end? You call him a religious fanatic. What do you call a secular person who says the world is coming to an end? An environmentalist. They're both fanatics. The world is not coming to an end. But it gives you meaning to believe that it is, and that you will save it by not using plastic straws and the like. The death of human preciousness. There's an irony about secular humanism. It doesn't do much to value the human. the Judeo-Christian world gave us the biblical notion that we are created in God's image, that means every single person is of infinite preciousness. The human being is infinitely precious. This is dying in the post-Christian world in which we live. A writer named Julian Baggini wrote in his book, Freedom Regained, that for many modern scientists, quote, consciousness is just the noise made by the firing of neurons. That's all we are, please understand. You feel that you love your child, or you love your husband, or you love your wife. That's just firing neurons. And if the secular scenario is true, God didn't make us. We just evolved from, we don't know from what, because we have no idea how we got to organic matter from inorganic matter. But let's say you feel one day we'll know. Fair enough. But it's meaningless. Every passion, every love, every deep emotion you have is just firing neurons. Or as the famous atheist anti-religious scientist Richard Dawkins, human beings are just gene machines. That's it, you're a gene machine. At least he's honest. We're nothing more than a gene machine. We're just stellar matter. The only difference between us and a pebble is that the pebble doesn't think it's important. We think we are. The pebble has no self-consciousness. We have self-consciousness. Human worth is dependent, ironically, upon the existence of a God creator of us. Otherwise, we are nothing in terms of meaning and in terms of specialness. We're not so special. We think we're special, but we're deluding ourselves. But that specialness came from being created in God's image. We are losing freedom. Freedom is a Judeo-Christian value. On the Liberty Bell, the iconic symbol of the United States of America, there's only one thing written aside from the company that made the bell. One thing, a verse from the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. In Leviticus, which nobody knows today, or unless they're religious, they knew their Bible, the founders of America, because that was their book. That was Abraham Lincoln's book. He very rarely went to church, but his tome of reference was the Bible. On that bell, on the Liberty Bell, is this verse, and you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all its inhabitants. Leviticus chapter 25. The United States, the freest country in the history of the world, the country to which France gave the Statue of Liberty, didn't give it to itself, didn't give it to another country, gave it to America. That country was founded on the belief that God wants us to be free. That's why the Exodus, the Jews leaving Egypt and slavery, was so central to American history. Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin were not believers in the Christian Trinity. They were cultural Christians, but they were deep admirers of the Bible, which was the basis of their values. They made a design for the Great Seal of the United States of America, and it was the Jews leaving Egypt, because they said, like the Jews left Egypt, we left Europe. There was a complete identification with this yearning for freedom, which, by the way, was quintessentially American. Human beings do not yearn to be free. That is a myth. Human beings yearn to be taken care of, which is the opposite of freedom. Even in the Bible, when the Jews got out of Egypt, within months they were yelling, we want to go back. The food was better. Yeah, they preferred good food as slaves to manna in the desert. Oh, it was better food back there. So what if we were slaves? By the way, that trade is made often. You give me goodies, government, and I'll give you my freedom. Most people don't yearn to be free. Judeo-Christian values yearn for freedom. The Bible yearns for freedom. And we have seen that during the lockdowns. The people who most accepted the draconian lockdowns were the most secular of the regimes or administrations or governments of the country, like New Zealand and Australia and various states in the United States. The more religious the state, the more it rebelled against the truly absurd lockdowns that took place that crushed children and crushed small businesses and crushed people's hopes. Freedom is another victim of the increasingly secular age. And you know why? Because the bigger the government, the smaller the God. Or if you will, the smaller God is, the bigger the government is. Again, I'm talking about in the Western world. The founders of the United States, the people who most believed in small government because they so believed in big freedom, were the people who most believed that God is the author of our rights. God is the author of freedom. You get rid of God, I promise you, you will get rid of freedom. We are living through that right now. The consequences of secularism are huge and disastrous. So let me put it this way. In the West, the bigger the God, the smaller the state. The bigger the state, the smaller the God. If you love freedom, you cannot love the big state. The bigger the state, the less the freedom. That's a given. This shouldn't even be debatable. If you give a handful of people more and more and more power, you have less freedom. It's amazing that one would have to make this argument. It should be so self-evident. And what ensures a smaller government is when people believe that there is a God to whom they are accountable. Because if you're not accountable to God for your behavior, then you will have to be accountable to people for your behavior, to the state. So the bigger the God, the smaller the state, the more the freedom. That was the founding principle. Big God, little state. It's not a theocracy. There's nothing to do with theocracy. Zero. It has to do with how people live their lives. In Washington's farewell address, he spoke about the religious foundations for a moral society. All the founders did. The chaos that we're seeing is a result of secularism. But people so believe in secularism, you are so taught from the earliest age that religion is for dummies, that the truly intelligent person is just definitionally secular. Who needs this bearded man in the sky? I know it because I get all this email, and I hear that so often. He believes in this big old man in the sky. That's how they think of it. The big old man in the sky. Not the creator of the human being who has endowed us with infinite worth and with rights. Which brings me to death of greatness in art, music, and architecture. A celebration of the ugly. In fact, a celebration of poop. I'm very serious. You have no idea, unless you follow this subject as I do, how much scatological art there is in the last half century. Scatological means related to excretion. So there's a vast amount of poop art, pee art, urine art, menstrual blood art, and the like. So one of the most famous of these was called Piss Christ. Oh, this was already late 20th century. And it was a jar with the quote-unquote artist, the artist's urine, and in the urine was a crucifix. So it's titled, inventively, Piss Christ. This thing went from museum to museum to museum around America. The most cherished symbol of Christians in a jar of urine. By the way, there's a very important side point to be made here. Can you imagine any artist in the West doing something equivalent with an illustration of Muhammad or a Quran? Of course not. You know why? Because all of these anti-religious activists in the West are cowards. That's why. They pick on Christians because they know they won't get hurt. They don't pick on Muslims because they know they probably will get hurt. Piss Christ was an example. This inventive idea, brilliant. I tell you, I don't know. This guy's a modern Michelangelo. So why is there so much urine and turd in modern art? Because the ugly is beautiful and the beautiful is irrelevant. And that is all a function of the secular, no God, no religion, no Bible world in which we live. There's nothing to elevate the artist to, since there's nothing above the artist. Music is my field, outside of what you may associate me with. I conduct orchestras periodically. I'm very involved in classical music. I know a lot about classical music, so I'll give you an example. Arguably the greatest composer who ever lived, Johann Sebastian Bach, wrote for the glory of God on the manuscript of every piece he ever wrote. So did Joseph Haydn, one of my 3 favorite composers, on every piece for the glory of God. These people wrote music to elevate the human spirit, because there's something to elevate the human spirit toward, namely God. No God, no elevation. You get turds. And in music, you get atonal cacophony, just notes. No melody, no harmony, no tonality, notes. There's even one piece by a modern 20th century composer in the United States where a person sits at a piano and plays nothing for those 4 minutes and whatever seconds. Nothing. And then the audience applauds. This is considered deep. In the secular world, it is deep. At the Museum of Contemporary Art in Orange County, California, they have in front of it, or had, I don't know if they still do, but for a long time, a giant sculpture of a dog. And the dog is constantly peeing right in front of the museum. How fitting. That's what that museum earned, a dog peeing on it. To think that we once had a Michelangelo or a Bach. Of course, these people were infused by the elevating belief that there is the creator above them. And they would design things with that in mind. We don't have that anymore. Noise in music, ugly in art, and ugly in architecture. And they're celebrated. I want to catch the turd exhibit, though. Shouldn't miss that before you leave this earth. If there's no God who says, do not steal, stealing isn't wrong. Same with murder, same with any of the 10 commandments or any commandment. This drives people crazy because I've done a video just on this and I saw the comments, none of which understood. The education system is so poor in our time, people don't even understand logic. I made the point, and I do always, and I made it at the beginning of this talk. There are some wonderful atheists. There are some wonderful secular people. Of course that's true. That's not my point. My point is that if there is no God who says do not steal or do not murder, stealing and murder are not wrong. That doesn't mean that people who don't believe in God will necessarily steal and murder. Of course you can think that stealing is wrong, and you can feel that murder is wrong if you don't believe in God. But it's just what you think and what you feel. It's your opinion. They're not objectively wrong. There's no objective moral truth if there is no God. That's the whole point. It's not an attack, it's just a fact. Now you'll say, well, but God doesn't exist. Okay, so if God doesn't exist, then neither does objective morality. That's all I'm asking people to understand. But that's a big deal. It's a very big deal. when you think that there is no objective morality, that it is all what you make up or your society makes up, yes, that's when you can start robbing children of their sexual innocence, as they're doing now in America and other English-speaking countries. Because you are the author of morality. If there is no God who is the author of right and wrong, then you are the author of right and wrong. Oh, but you'll say, but I have a conscience. To which I will say, so what? Everyone who does bad has a conscience. It's amazing how much evil is done by people with clear consciences. The conscience is not a terribly powerful thing in most people. I'm a big believer that there is a conscience. But if the conscience is not informed by the question, what does God want me to do? God doesn't want you to steal, and God doesn't want you to murder. Then it's going to be a problem. The death of objective morality is ultimately the death of morality. When people, as they are now, as I speak to you, stealing in greater numbers than ever before, whole groups of kids just go into stores and wipe the shelves clean and take stuff away. Do you think that they believe that there is a God who said, do not steal? I'll bet they don't. You will live a life differently if you believe God said, do not steal. Most likely, there are people who may believe that and still steal. That's true. The human condition is very complex. I still will place my bet that I will get better behavior on a person who believes that God said to him or her, do not steal. We know the consequences of religious extremism. We don't know the consequences of secular extremism. The real danger to survival of Western civilization, this whole thing, this whole project is in danger. When you tear flowers out of the soil that nurtured them, those flowers will die. We're tearing the flowers out of the Judeo-Christian soil that nurtured them. I'm Dennis Prager.